Right. And getting things going. So we're going to have fun today. We're just going to be doing a little bit of an office hours, sharing my screen. We're going to be talking about some stuff, some topics, things today. And let me get my notes up. We'll see if some people join us. And we're going to talk about what have you made with Node-RED in a professional setting. We're going to talk about would you consider yourself a low-code champion in your professional environment? Does IT know about your Node-RED deployments? Why not? And would you consider Node-RED the de facto low-code solution? So those are some of the discussions we are going to have today. I'm actually wanting to turn off my background, so I'll just remove that real quick so it looks a little bit better. And we'll see if we get some people jumping in here. We're going to give a few minutes. I know we're a little bit early. Ooh, keep it back. Office hours. And because I realize I'm sharing that right now. And we'll see if we have some questions come in. And we'll go from there. So, let's see. I'm going to go check. It looks like we got some people watching on our Facebook. We are going to be sharing from Discord. Basically, we're going to be kind of trying to create a community with our Discord environment. Really trying to make it kind of thinking about like what are we going to be doing with Node-RED in the professional environment. One of the things that is like what we do at FlowFuse is trying to really elevate the use of Node-RED in a lot of the professional environments. And what we mean by that, and make sure, yeah, you can see my camera, is we want people to kind of start thinking about the concept of what it makes uh means to make Node-RED available in the industrial and let's say professional environments, and why we need to start changing some of our philosophies and thoughts about low code and so forth. So yeah, so we'll see if we get some people in here and then we'll kind of get started. So um one of the things that we can start on is, does IT know about your Node-RED deployments? Why not? And that's one of the things that we solve here at FlowFuse. And what does that mean? So a lot of the times, as engineers, and I can be an example of this, is we, and especially the manufacturing, if we talk about the manufacturing environment, is essentially you need to create an environment. You have to solve problems, and sometimes it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, production and manufacturing is, I need to make production happen, and I need to do that in a way that it makes my life a little bit easier in that production environment. And sometimes we'll go through situations of deploying things without asking for permission, and there's a lot of times, especially in the OT space, that happens. And and what we need to do is help elevate those people into a position where they can start leveraging tools in a safe, secure, and scalable environment. um, and let's talk about like what that means. Like, when have I deployed something like Node-RED in an environment to collect information? And one of the cases that I see a lot of is cases where there's maybe a historian that exists in the production environment, but that historian is super important to not touch. And what it means by not touching is that there has auditing reasoning, there is some compliance that they have to store data for X amount of period of time. And so there's almost like this rule of thumb that this diesel engine of data collection sits off to the side and it just runs. And it runs and runs and runs, and it's there for the day in which something they get audited. And often because of that, they don't like to necessarily touch it so often. So automation engineers, analytics, process engineers will come in and start will start thinking about how they can start providing value and how they can get access to this data without necessarily touching that historian. And that's where kind of, solutions like Node-RED kind of start off, because it's really a three-layer. You have like the data collection space, which is kind of at the lower level, and maybe some transformation at that area. And then you start getting into, let's say, the historian kind of zones. And I always like to refer to like the Purdue level. And I think about the Purdue level being the spot where you or the, let's say, the Purdue level, like the level 3, level 4, you're basically doing the transformation and maybe some visualization. But there's just so many different ways in which you start having to deploy things in whether that's just a Python script that collects information or some other mechanism. But in the case, if it's like a Python script, if you're the only person that's like deploying it in that spot or in that region, um it's not necessarily if you're the only person deploying in your, you're the only one that knows about it. I guess I can, what I mean by that is you're creating a situation in which if you leave or you change jobs, you are now stuck. If you're staying within the same company, you're still stuck to that operation because you've created provided a value in a way that has intrinsic value to the company, and now you're tied to it, and that'll always be part of what you do day in, day out. Like, if that breaks, you're going to be called up and you're going to come fix it. And that's just going to be the case. Worst case scenario is you leave the company now something breaks and they don't know where to look to figure out why said something said broke. So I'm actually going to do something real quick. I'm going to create, find the invite so I can send people the invite that are jumping in through, let's say, Facebook and YouTube and Twitch. So just give me 1 second. There it is. Oh, that's not what I want to do. Office hours. And I'm basically just copying the link and then dropping that in here. Copy link address. Drop it in here. So if you want to join the Discord, I just sent it in chat if you're coming in through one of these other sources, not directly from our Discord channel. But basically, I was talking about the value that you bring to the company, and sometimes you use solutions in a way that kind of comes into shadow IT, is where essentially the IT company, the IT part of, say, manufacturing operations, don't necessarily want to take ownership over miscellaneous activities. They don't want to be the ones that have to be called. So a lot of times they put up like a firm rule, say like, we only support, you do not put anything in here that doesn't support our different systems. And oftentimes what comes of that is, from that edict, is essentially, well, then I'm going to deploy something in my environment that they don't know about, and we're just not going to talk about it. And that happens often in a way that has a negative aspect of things, that has a negative connotation for trying new things, because really the crux of it, innovation, starts from doing things and creating things that may be unconventional, or that somebody has it signed off as like the right way of doing things. And I think to myself and say, well, that's the basis of what innovation is creating something that is not necessarily the way things have been done. So that's what Node-RED has often been seen in a lot of environments, is, especially in manufacturing, as people deploy Node-RED, and the people that are deploying it, they don't really have too much concern about security. They don't have too much concern about redundancy or backups. But their concern is safety and production. And in the case of Node-RED, there's really not that much concern of safety per se, as long as you're not, say, let's say, changing safety controllers or things like that. But what you're doing is just essentially interacting with the system. A lot of the times it's a one-way data aggregation. You're just pulling data from the system. There may be cases where you're, let's say, doing a stored procedure and capturing data from the edge, or from, let's say, from a database, and sending it like a recipe control. And these things start occurring, and projects and plants and facilities start depending on these solutions. um, and what is the succession plan? And that's kind of the crux of the question: is does your IT know about your Node-RED deployments, and what are your steps, and what is your plan to create an environment in which they do? Because that's going to be the most important question as we think about this digital transformation. Is not so much of, I mean, the first step is say, well, what do we have? What are we using? What has been beneficial? And what are the next steps you're going to take? And I've been on a lot of calls. Customers have essentially built their own version of what FlowFuse is in a lot of ways, where they're capturing um, different systems, essentially deploying, whether it's in their own AWS system or AWS cloud, or their own on-prem Kubernetes environments and deployments. This is where we've seen people having to build their own solutions, and this is where FlowFuse comes in a lot of ways for just the Node-RED. But what are you going to do as you upgrade? What is your digital transformation journey? What are the steps you're going to have to, I say undo, but how are you going to elevate them into a productive environment in which it is supported by a team that knows it exists? And that's step one, is knowing it exists, being proud that you created something of value to the point where you can say, this I created, and little did you know, all of the company from the digital transformation, not digital transformation, but the business intelligence teams, is dependent on, let's say, integration that was created at these lower levels. And that kind of brings up the second point, of why these tools exist and why they're created. Is it's, I can just create, I just wrote a blog about this. It just, no, actually it hasn't gone out yet. But the process of creating a an application is sometimes very complex. And one of the biggest complexities of creating your application is that the application development process is like playing that telephone game as like a kid. Is you have your engineer that is going to be using the solution, typically not a developer or anything like that, and they have a concept that's going to make the product line. A lot of the times, is a process controls engineer, and the process control engineer says, "Hey, you know what? I need to take data from this system and send it to this system." And in the process of doing that, I need to, manipulate it, and I may not know entirely all the things that I need to do. So therefore, it becomes very complex, to ask a, let's say, a developer to start going along this journey and say, hey, I need you to build something that I don't quite know what I want to build yet, but it's going to start off with these foundational bricks. And a lot of the times, the response you'll get from the development team is says, well, when you figure out all the things you want, let me know. And so then you go through two different iterations of what that response is going to be. It says, okay, well, I either lie and say I know everything that I want, and say, hey, development team, here's my specs, here's everything that I want, and they go off and build it. Or the other option is essentially you can either go off and build it, or it just never gets built at all. Or I guess the third option is you build it yourself, and it's a continual iterative process. And that's what really the digital transformation is: buying into a continual iterative process. So looks like I've got some people jumping into the Discord. Feel free to drop some questions if there's something that's interesting you. You see kind of like today's topics, but I'll continue with that building of the iterative process. Is saying, I don't know exactly everything that I want to build, but I know there's a core foundation, because when I send that information over to the development team, they build the first thing, and the first thing you say is, and I know many engineers have been here, says, wow, I really forgot to tell you about that key bit of information that is going to be fundamental to this project. And the problem with situations like that is there has to be some humility that says, "Hey, I didn't tell you something that's incredibly important to this that changes the whole foundation of the product you just built for me." It becomes very, very frustrating from a developer because they don't really understand the process of what you're trying to accomplish, what you're trying to do, and so you think about what is that step? What is how do you circumvent that? And that's where being your own citizen developer really comes into play, saying, I am going to build my own solution. It may not be perfect, but what I can now do is enlist those developers to help me build my own system where I can do, let's say, 80% of the work that I know, but there might be a unique connection that I'm going to need support. Maybe it's a database or some other system that says, hey, I need you to create permissions. I need access to this database. I need this like the structure. Help me build the, let's just say, the SQL query to collect that information or to store that information. But for the most part, I can do all the manipulation within, let's say, something like Node-RED. Maybe, a lot of times it starts off as people just saying, I'm going to do it in, Python. And that's a strategy that I went with when I was an automation controls engineers. How can I collect this information to do a procedure steps? And when you go down that rabbit hole of creating something in Python, the struggle that or just structured text is, like I mentioned before, is you then become the owner of that responsibility. And one of the best things that you can do for your career is create value in which you're no longer the person responsible for it, that you can hand off. And that's really where things like ladder logic for PLCs really comes into play, is you create um, some value that is put into a PLC that anybody has access. And that's why Rockwell is so successful, is because they put all the naming and tags and convention into the PLCs. And I know Siemens has been moving in that direction, but essentially it's the lazy approach that is successful at the end of the day, is you can create value and put it somewhere else, and somebody else can come behind you and see exactly what you've written. So that's a lot of the things that you start thinking about, and I kind of try to make parallels between ladder logic and low code. Is low code brings that parallel um, experience of doing ladder logic. It's yes, there's always a better coding structure than than ladder logic. You could do other tools like structured text, like SCL, STL, are more powerful than doing ladder logic. But at the end of the day, if your peers don't really know those, let's say, specific commands, you fall in a situation where it's not as valuable because only you're the ones that can troubleshoot it. So there's always exceptions to that rule, and that's exactly what a node is an instance in which a node is a collection of code that is written in complex form, or and let's say Siemens is a function block. Oh, somebody invited themselves to speak. But if you have any questions or want to say anything, please feel free. We'll bring you on. You can talk about it. Just know that we are streaming this to YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. So, but the value, going back to that structured text, is there's cases where structured text is stored inside of a function block, and you'll see that a lot in, like, let's say, the Siemens world. Is you have a sub block of code that essentially is then be able to be reused in other different areas. And a lot of the times in that process, it becomes very much a hardened piece of code, and therefore the understanding of how that code works is kind of irrelevant because the fundamental code is hardened and it's reusable. And that's where structured text and things like that really comes into play, like SCL, STL, all of those different type of languages you'll see in PLCs. And that's what a node is. A node inside of low code is generally a bit of code that has a very, very specific and unique purpose, that is repeatable and reusable in many different cases. So I know we got some people on YouTube, some people on Twitch. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in. If you want to kind of drop in maybe an example And if you want to kind of come in and talk about it on the Discord, feel free to kind of come in and chime in and say you want to speak. But um, so if we kind of think about the low code node purpose, and that's the value of having an open source low code no code solution, and is that that code that exists in a node is then repeatable and usable outside of my organization. And you can start pulling in from different organizations and saying, okay, well, this is on the palette manager within, let's say, whatever your low code solution or equivalent is. You can then capture that information. Maybe it's integration with a specific database. InfluxDB always comes up. One of our more popular blogs that we write, and it it we just see people are wanting to do that level of integration. We can provide you with the how-to of even how to use those nodes. um but looks like we got a question. I'm gonna take a look over here. You can't hear me? No way, that'd be terrible. That is hilarious. If I'm just talking to myself, it says turn, okay, my microphone, crisp audio. It says that I'm pulling in information. Let me pull up Twitch real quick to see if I got audio, because that would be disappointing.
Scavs can't post on
So I'm doing a little test to hear. See if I'm doing a little test. Okay, I've got audio coming in. Okay, I've got audio coming in. I've got myself looping, it sounds like now. But I definitely have audio coming through because I'm seeing it through Twitch, so we're good. So I don't know if it's on my side. It might be on your side. Please let me know. You might have to turn on audio, or maybe it's the setting for a date audio output. So let me just make a message. Audio is good on my side and on Twitch as well. But yeah, if you want to drop in questions here. Hey, Mechatronic Maid, what's up? Hey, feel free to we're jumping in the Discord. If you want to ask some questions, if you want to jump in and have some input, we're spending a lot of our time there. But yeah, we're just kind of talking today. If there's something you want to see on FlowFuse, we can obviously, of course, do that, or see that in Node-RED, we can do that. But what the goal, I guess, of these office hours is to pique interest, uh, peak thought, kind of like thought concepts. Correct me if you think that I have a different perspective. I'm always open to learning and different perspectives. But yeah, it's just a time period in which, if people want to come in, ask some questions. If not, maybe there'll be a little bit of rambling from my side, and talking about how I see the industry, and really kind of going through my thoughts in a lot of ways. Is just using this time, see whether or not people want to hear the rambling and thoughts of Grey Juba, and or has a time of, say, because please, this is the whole point, is just to come in here, ask questions. So I'm gonna just kind of pick some topics that we'll go over and continue on. Um, One of the questions that comes up, and I started thinking about recently, was champions. And when I think about some of my past previous histories with some of the companies I've worked for, I was in the data analytics space and cybersecurity, a company called Splunk. And one of the things we refer to is we had to be a Splunk champion at a company. There's somebody that's very knowledgeable and would stand up and talk about their capabilities of using Splunk. And I take that parallel and I'm saying, okay, well, we have all these people that exist in the community, and they're Node-RED champions. And I think to myself, I'm like, okay, they're Node-RED champions, but how do we elevate them to a spot? And we see especially Node-RED champions a lot in the like home automation, where they're talking about all the cool things they're doing. But we need to see, and I'd like to hear more about what people are doing in this space from a kind of, hey, you know what I did cool this week is like, example in a manufacturing facility or production or enterprise is saying, oh yeah, we took data from this. It was something that we've been trying to do. And I suggested, why don't we use Node-RED for this? And I just want to be curious if people, why people aren't necessarily talking about it, because I know they exist. I've talked to people. And I've noticed amongst these champions, and these champions have a tendency to be reserved. And I kind of want to think about why these low code, let's just start off with calling them low code champions, is why they have a tendency to not talk about the cool and awesome things that they're doing. And I think that is the fundamental flaw. I say flaw, but the flaw that the persona, the perception needs to change in the industry is that there is no negative aspect of using a tool like low code instead of structured text. There is nothing wrong with that. It is should be encouraged. It should be the go-to solution. And I use always use the parallel with ladder logic to say that, with ladder logic, people will sit back and say, there's like this persona of people that say, well, I only code in structured text because it's better. Like, we got to get over our egos and say, I code in something that is more valuable and usable to a broader audience that provides value to the company in a faster and scalable and easier way. And that's the thing that I feel that is missing in the low code community is we need to elevate the pride, not to an obnoxious level, but we need to have some. We need to be a little humble, but we also need to be like, yeah, I did that in low code because it's easier. I was able to do it quicker. And that there should not be any negative aspects of doing it in something other than low code. So once you're curious about it, please drop it in the comments. I'm sure this is going to be uploaded to YouTube and different perspectives. So if you have different thoughts on it, if you've experienced I guess the word that I would use is like almost a shame to do that. I'm just curious if people have experienced it because that's one of the things that I've realized is my best selling opportunity that I've had and enlisted support from customers is saying, especially project managers, is saying, do you want to be the owner of this project forever? And most of the time, project managers do not want to be owners of certain projects. Their goal is to go in, deploy something, teach a group of people that are supposed to going to be responsible for it with this new technology that is replacing an old technology in a way that they can manage it. And that's the key of project managers. Whereas in the in when I explained it in that way, that's when it just clicked. They said, "Oh, now I know why I need to use a low code solution because it makes my life a lot easier." And forward looking thinking is saying, "Okay, well, I can deploy this, and not only will my team be able to manage it, but it can also pull in resources externally to us that can support this because it is a tool. It's like ladder logic. And I always will go back to the ladder logic. People know ladder logic. Doesn't matter whether it's a Siemens, a Rockwell, a Wago, a Codesys. It doesn't matter. It's the same methodology. Yeah, of course, there's some different things. There's like left to right, top to bottom, and there's a different. I can't remember. I think it's Mitsubishi. Some of the older stuff was like you had to figure out about whether or not it was what part of the rung it was on. But I don't have that enough experience to really kind of speak to that too many levels. But there are those cases that I think that people need to um, really start developing and having a voice and being like, this is a beneficial thing. This is a good thing. I am an innovator and I am providing. Hey, how's it going? If you have any questions, we're up in Discord. If you want to talk or have some perspectives, so the things that we're talking about today is um, What have you made with Node-RED in a professional settings? Would you consider yourself a low-code champion in your professional environment? If you have any answers to this question, feel free to answer them. Um, but the crux of today is building confidence and satisfaction with the great things that people are building in the industry, and to promote that across the industry and say, yeah, shout from the rooftops, you build something awesome. And yeah, that's kind of where my head is in a lot of ways. Um, the last one that I have on there is, would you consider Node-RED the de facto low code solution? And that's something I've kind of thought about to myself, and saying, well, there's it's you can really break that down to say low code open source. And it's definitely, I would say, definitely the low code solution. But open to discussion, because really at the end of the day, it's about figuring out what is your perspective. So if you've used low code, been happy with it, please drop it in chat. And you've used Node-RED, please drop it in chat. So, what have you made with Node-RED in a professional setting? So one of my first projects that's kind of really taken me down this pathway, and this really wasn't in like a full on professional setting, but it's always a good story because it kind of really paves a lot of the pictures that I've seen. Is um my first project in which I used Node-RED, of course, for when I figured out and found. So, um, working at a as a corporate automation controls engineer in a carpet and hardwood flooring manufacturing company, and I used an ESP8266, which had just recently had the ability to program it with Arduino, and that was really starting to come about, and you had to do like flashing and all that fun stuff. And I'm sure it's come a long way. This was right 2016, 17 timeframe when, and then I found out about Raspberry Pis having Node-RED, and that's when I discovered Node-RED. And I one of the issues that we've always run into is collecting data from, let's say, remote location, which brings up a good point. This is really my first project, was exactly the webinar that we're having at the end of the month, which is the ncd.io. And the ncd.io was kind of talking about basically using industrial sensors to collect information from kind of, let's say, various environments, and communicating data over mesh networks to their gateway, and leveraging Node-RED to transform that data and send it to multiple different locations. And really, my first project with Node-RED was very much in the same alignment, which was I had an ESP8266 connected with a I2C uh, temperature sensor, and I was collecting temperature or some other switch. Maybe it was just a switch, and sending that information over MQTT, leveraging Mosquito to a Node-RED um, environment in which I was transforming the data and sending it on to a database. In that particular case, it was one of the products we were investigating a lot on, which was Splunk in the manufacturing environment, which was kind of the story of my career, is kind of taking that transformative steps between the manufacturing, or from the data from sensor to MQTT to uh, uh, to transform it into, parse it, and then send it into a database of some form. Um, I do want to add that I was pretty proud of myself because I did get that ESP8266 connected via Wi-Fi over an enterprise network, WPA2 enterprise, which that had a radius server on the back end to be able to create the connection via the Wi-Fi. Yes. Awesome. Glad to hear that. So you use Node-RED in almost all implementations. Node-RED's ability to talk to machines is great. That's awesome. Um, can you mention the type of controllers or things like that that you might have used in the past? Do you, when you say machines, what type of machines are you referring to? Might be a delay, so we'll see if we get some answer here in a few. But so that was one of my first projects, and I've seen a lot of other different projects because I've been kind of supporting a lot of professional projects. And a lot of the times it kind of falls into two flavors. It's the get data from a machine, like we see in the example here, and then we see examples of cases where it's used as a backend for a server. I started working on a project in which I had Node-RED essentially being the backend for a website. Didn't fully complete and deploy that one, but that was more of a personal project to be able to capture data and send it. But 1 second, I'll be right back. Turn my camera off just for a second. Sorry about that. Had needed had some allergies and it was bothering me. But yeah, so I don't know what things that I can work on. Maybe we'll pull up FlowFuse in our Node-RED instance and start messing around for a little bit. But yeah, drop the questions in, keeping it fun. We're gonna start up the streaming again. We're gonna be doing office hours um, once a week on Thursdays. We might be pushing the time just a smidge to maybe 30 minutes later. Just have some meetings that conflict a little bit, but yeah, this is gonna be a time. Come in, ask some questions. We're gonna make it relaxed. Nothing too complicated, and you know, see if we can get this. And yeah, so let me think about how I do this real quick. And I'm going to go over to Discord and I'm going to share my screen. And we're going to, let's do some Node-RED. Let's figure out some stuff. Awesome. That worked out a lot pretty easy. So let me see if I can, yeah, there we go. So you guys can see that over there. And then your stream is still running. Oh man, it's giving me some issues because I have paused my application. So this is the first time that I've tried to share my screen, and that is not doing exactly what I wanted to do. Let's see if I can get this to work real quick. So if I click over here, it disappears on me. Interesting. We've paused this preview to save your resources. Well, don't do that. That is interesting. I'm sure. Imagine your stream is still running. We paused the previews, so you can't see it on Twitch because I'm screen sharing from my Discord. So if you're in my Discord server, you're able to see this information. You're just not able to see it from the Twitch and things like that. So I'll have to keep that in mind in the future. But what I can also do is just turn off the Discord app and then turn on my remote desktop, and then we're winning overall. So now everybody can see stuff. So I'm just kind of doing some manipulation there. There we go. So let's jump into some Node-RED stuff, and I'll be trying to watch, see if there's any questions. But yeah. So here, open up some Red. So let's think about what we want to connect to maybe in the next office hours. Maybe we'll talk about, I don't know, connecting MQTT. Maybe there's a different service. Please, if you're watching this later and you're saying, "Hey, what should I stream or talk about next time?" Please drop those in the chat because I definitely want to show additional information that might be valuable. Um, one of the latest things that I've been kind of working on, maybe that's something I'll do is, so I mentioned that I used to work for a company called Splunk, and Cribble is a solution that allows you to send data and mainly for IT side for logs and things like that. And one of my thoughts is like, what if I created a way to collect information from, let's say, servers with that have Node-RED on it? You might be able to capture the logs and leverage Node-RED since you already have it on it, and from those disparate type of devices out in the world. So maybe we'll go through that. That's probably not going to be too interesting with other people. You can go over DynamoDB. Got some Kepware discussions, timescale. So all these are capables if somebody wants to. If this is going to be interesting for somebody in the future, but um, might be might be dropping the office hours a little bit earlier today. But wanted to see if there's any, just again, open this up for a weekly discussion. We'll stick around for, some time and maybe I'll work on something, but let's do some research. What could we integrate with? Let's figure out what Dashboard 2.0. Let's see what's new on Dashboard 2.0. Dashboard. We'll update that. I think there was a new blog. Let's see what we've got here. Oh yeah, we had a new from Summit introduce exploring dashboard layouts, grid. Maybe that's what we'll do. We'll mess with the grid layout. I haven't done with too much with the grid layout. Node-RED must be restarted, so let's do that real quick. Let's take a snapshot real quick. Restart and create. And what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and restart that real quick. And come over here, refresh it. Bingo. So let's mess with dashboard for a little bit. Maybe we got some things we can do. Check Discord real quick, make sure there's no questions. Nope. But yeah, let's do dashboard stuff. Let's get one of my data generators. Let's see what kind of data we got coming in here. Perfect. And we'll just copy that, drop it over here. Let's see what we've got as far as dashboards. Perfect. I just need that real quick. Actually, I need to figure out what this port is real quick. Just give me a second. That's do. Services. actually. Windows, run Windows as a service. I gotta do some quick configurations real quick. FlowFuse, blog, device, agent. I need to put edit. Sorry, you're not seeing this, but it'll be just a second and we'll be able to support 1880. That's funny. There we go. Now we're getting our dashboard. Sorry it took me that long. But basically we're going to create some deploy or create a dashboard. We'll just kind of make something quick. And we'll deploy. There's our data right there. Device. There we go. Data gen. We would set it to payload. But yeah. And there we go. We've got data coming in. Now let's take some of this information. We'll create a little quick dashboard. Do a change there. Copy that path. That's not what you do. Message up payload. So message up payload. And we're going to set the value to message.payload.name. And we'll just have this label as name. Go. And done. Let's see if what we got here. What did we put? What page did we put that? We put a barcode text input. Let's say we create a group and put this on a new UI page. We call this new UI page office hours. And click add and add edit group name office hours update and done. Perfect. Okay, so simply put, we come over here, office hours, and done. No name because we haven't injected it. There we go, Craig Freeman. And we can do that for the rest of them. But instead of just, we'll save this some of this for next time. Unless somebody has some questions, we're just kind of having some fun today for the rest of the office hours. Unless somebody needs to know something here, not just casual streaming and dashboard building and getting some experience. So if something comes up you want to ask, feel free to do it. mess with this one yet. Let's just see what it does. What's the documentation? None just yet. Can add it to dashboard.